All righty. All right. Hello everyone that's on the Zoom now and we'll be watching later on the YouTube. Uh so basically today is the first day of our Slanted Commune lecture series. We'll probably just keep doing these for a while. We have like a pretty solid lineup the next few weeks. Pretty exciting people that are going to be sharing, their thoughts and how they look at the world and how they look at whatever. And so I think just we're just gonna. I think I'll just kind of I'll share some announcements and then we'll just let Tucker take over. So first, I just wanted to go over the kind of next few weeks of lectures. So this week is obviously Tucker, and then I'm thinking next weekend is going to be Ian Bell. He's in the lineup, and then Ozzy will be giving a lecture at some point soon. Me, Ben Pinnell will be giving a lecture at some point soon. Kazuki, I believe, will be giving a lecture some point soon. Alonzo will be giving a lecture some point soon. So we've got a lot of stuff, and I'll try to do one like every weekend. I might not be able to lead everyone, but the goal is to just kind of just put everything out there and just start seeing what the group has to offer, and hopefully more people get involved. So if you're watching this, feel free to just start an event or something. Just do what you got to do. Like it's not any one person's group. It's our group, and I think we're still kind of waiting to see the commune part of this come alive. But it'll happen eventually. Another thing, I'm still looking for some people to like help out with graphics and admin stuff. Um, So that will be, I'm looking, if you can help out a few hours a week, that would be pretty fire. Um, there's a car driving by. So that, I'm going to basically be trying to figure out some website data storage problems so that I can start trying to get more people to join and we can put more stuff efficiently on the website. I've been kind of hesitant to put more data on there because it's kind of running out of space. But and then what else? The competition is well underway. We've been I think we're almost close to a month into the competition at this point. I'm hoping to have a critique at some point soon. I have some jury people that will join to help. So if you have anything for that, that's good. But I think that's all. So Tucker, here you go, man.
Hey, hey, howdy everybody. Um, yeah, so I guess I'll just kind of jump right into it. It's going to be about probably 60 to 70% rambling and 30% kind of thought out, pre kind of dissected, nuanced content. But I definitely think, I don't know, it's hard for me to kind of start off by even talking about this as a lecture because I think, I don't know, I feel like it takes a lot of time to be exposed to what you're presenting to really like create a good lecture from that. And this is um, more just kind of about my relationship to things. And I think on some level, how my relationship to things and people in my life and my passions and my interests, how there's something that maybe kind of connects with other people through that. Um, yeah, so it's just kind of loosely what this the general structure that this might follow. You can kind of see, I mean, there's a lot of reiterating and stuff here because I think there are some important points that I'll probably continuously touch on as like a thread through this. But yeah, so let's just jump right in. So this is a little bit of context about myself because I think it's pretty important. I think our upbringings have a huge impact on pretty much our outlook in every way, specifically in design as well. Um, so this is the farm I grew up on. I live on right now. It's in upstate New York. It doesn't look that upstate, but everywhere north of the city is considered upstate in New York, which is great. Um, it is it's an incredible place to be. You can see that waterfall, tallest waterfall on this side of the Mississippi, actually higher than Niagara Falls. That's like 5 minutes from my house, and it truly was an incredible place to grow up. It's an incredible place to be working now. Incredibly grateful for the opportunity for it, and yeah, and this is a quote that a friend of mine shared with me, and he does political, like local rural political research, and he found this really beautiful quote that I really enjoy. I think it really encapsulates this area. Um, but upstate New York is not a have-not country. It's the ordinary place in the United States. It has a quiet people and 1,000 quiet towns. And I think I mean, I can't think of a better way to describe it. There's no hustle bustle of the city here. There's people content in their life. There's a level of contentness here. There's more barns than normal buildings, more cows than cars. This is something where, I mean, I wasn't even aware that architecture had a label because of the environment I grew up in until probably late high school. Um, and so, kind of jumping in, now that you have that context, kind of my upbringing and why the value of analyzing our work here. So, I can really only speak to it in my personal case. But I think these are kind of the big things that over time I've found the benefits of kind of taking a step back. And there's definitely a lot of importance to just creating, and I'll talk about that. Just create, create, create as much as you can. But at the same time, I think like understanding what you're creating is actually benefiting you. How is that feeding your growth? How is that helping you understand what you're trying to do versus maybe what you're actually doing? And so yeah, it really did. It kind of helped me understand my relationship to the things I'm doing, the things I want to do. Um, Produce better. I think it starts to become less a question of better work. I think there's a level of thoughtfulness that can go into things that doesn't necessarily increase the quality every time. But yeah, just more work, more volume, like I was talking about. Um, and I'm hoping that for anyone listening, that you found something that the work that you do is something you're passionate about. I think it's essential. I think that, and we'll kind of get into this. It's one of the challenges of being interested in architecture is that it's kind of like a black hole, even if you're not interested in it. Um, and I think that's something that's kind of interesting that we'll kind of get into here. But I think a lot of it has to do with gaining a level of patience and respect with yourself, with your passion, with your interests, with the work you do. And I think we'll kind of dive into that. So you need to understand how you judge your own work. And this, I mean, I'm starting off with just an absolute masterpiece. This was probably the first piece of visual media I ever created in my life. You see that my first finger paint when I was 19 months old. I mean, I love this. I love it so much. It's a tremendous work to me. I mean, you can see that there's a, I just had this ironic like whimsical like just exploration here. There was no way that I was thinking about anything other than the fact that I was making this when it was being made. I mean, an absolute baby, an infant painted this, and I look at it and it looks like an infant painted it, and I love it for that. It's kind of see like a squid or like an octopus or something. It's maybe flowers, but it definitely starts when you're starting to analyze your work. Maybe start with the things that you know you really enjoy about what you produce. I think that's a good place to start. It's never good to start, I think, kind of understanding how you approach perspectives by looking at like what you think is your worst work. I think that's something you want to introduce how you approach your relationship with the work that you maybe aren't proud of. Um, and kind of jumping into this, it's like now comparing. Comparison is a huge part of judging your own work. So the piece on the left, obviously the one we just looked at, and then the one on the right, which I did in my thesis here. And I talk a lot about context, and I think in almost a comical way, you can see that the artist on the left was not interested in the product. They were just I was interested in the making of it, which allows me to connect more with it now. Whereas I think the piece on the right, in a way, it's kind of, it looks like it's cool, but it looks like I was trying to make it look cool, and I was. I think that's kind of oftentimes where a lot of, at least personally, I find my work falls short is that I'm trying to create something with the end product already in my mind, and I think the best work really does come when you are at the whim of the process. You are just creating because in that instant you feel compelled to create. I think if definitely a level of planning is required for architecture specifically, but I think on a smaller scale when you're actually going through the design and you're really iterating and stuff, I don't think there's a lot of value to project what you believe an iteration will be before you get there. Um, and it feels a little like sterile compared to the left. It looks like it's trying to be provocative, which kind of means it's not provocative in that way. Um, and what I'll get into more, and I think what's really important is that all of your work is equally as valuable, and that you cannot produce the next thing without the last. So it's all equally as necessary, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's all equally good or bad. And so this kind of gets into a perspective I had for a period of time that I think a lot of students have at some point in academia. And at one point, I don't know if it's during art of building, I don't know if it's during maybe a lecture, or maybe you're working on something and you're doing some biophilic design. I don't know. But you have this realization, you're like, oh my gosh, everything is architecture. And you have to have that. I mean, I think that's a hurdle you have to jump through. And I think it's hard to evaluate like what you've created if you're comparing it to kind of like all the beauty that exists in the world, which is like what you kind of imply when you say everything is architecture. I think there's something valuable to letting something kind of stand beautifully on its own. And looking at the image here, I'll just give a little bit of background on it, which because you'll be seeing a ton of this specific project, which is my thesis project. Um, Basically took the pre-existing White House and just kind of blew it up to obscene proportions. I mashed neoclassical design, influence from Gehry, contemporary forms, uh, kind of blowing up the proportions of pre-existing like notions such as the angel on the top, like a cornice and these detailings and all that sort of stuff. And then just two massive affordable housing towers in the back, just kind of the sick, the tired, the poor, the hungry. The building is taking them in, and it's now they're looking down over the constituents as opposed to it being, a single individual just kind of having this one home location that just kind of projects power, whatever. But yeah, I think so. Kind of going back to it, I think letting the intensity of what you love, kind of override the simple, digestible beauty that like I think everything inherently has, is tricky because like I said, when everything is architecture, then I mean, what's a flower? A flower it can just be a flower. And that's really great. I think there's some value to that. And just like going back to that, I mean, look how dumb that sentence looks next to this image. I mean, like sometimes like things are just what they are, and that is fantastic. It makes it easy to fall in love with something when it's not under the umbrella of something you have a lot of invested interest in. um but I think there's still value in that. You can say there is an architecture to everything, and in that way you're using the word differently. I think maybe in a more biological sense when you refer to the idea that everything has composition, it has structure, it has like underlying maybe lines of interest. There's datum lines that appear in nature, all these different things. But that is really using architecture to describe it, not as what architecture is in our minds, or at least what I'm going to be approaching it as, which is buildings, because really architecture is just buildings. But what about paper architecture? And as academia is basically the ultimate expression of paper architecture in every way. I mean, unless there's students out there, which I applaud them, who are out there building their building their projects and their designs. Everything, it lives in like the eternal, the mind cloud. It's and I think for that reason, we maybe need to be less critical of paper architecture than I think we are right now. Because no matter how many competitions you win or structural diagrams you draw, it's not materialized as an experience like beyond the mind. It hasn't taken on the burden yet of using the finite space we have available on this planet to try and create something. And I think what's also challenging about paper architecture is that it really is only awesome for people who like paper architecture. I mean, like, I don't really like, I've showed images like this to my family. I mean, I don't think like my mom will not be able to connect with these images, and that's not good. I want my designs to be something that anyone can appreciate. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, of paper architecture and stuff that I've found within my work is that on it, oftentimes when I'm just creating, I'm forgetting that what I'm creating for, you have to create for yourself, but it's also our responsibility to create things that other people can understand. Um, but we try and put up a point and we try and convince people that it's like, oh, this could be built, right? Like, look, I did a plan, I did a section, I have all these pretty renderings. It's like we really do our best with paper architecture to make it feel as real and as tangible as possible, because maybe in that way we can start to bridge the gaps that are just missing from the fact that this is not, in my mind, it's really just not that it's not architecture, but it's not the ultimate manifestation of architecture, which is built work. Um, and I think what paper architecture really should be used to do is explore the possibilities that built works can't. It can't push the conversation forward on a physical level, right? So first, with paper architecture, we have to challenge these notions at a conceptual level, and I think that's where the strength of it lies. That's where the necessity of design in academia and theoretical design in professional practice kind of lies. Um, but the ultimate application of it is getting it built, or building something from it. And in that way, I think it's transcended the limits of an exploration and it's become a shared experience. And I think that is ultimately that's what I mean, that is, I think that's what every great architect is trying to do, is to create an idea that we can craft shared experiences through space and through our understanding of it now creates an understanding with it for you, a conversation, a relationship. Um, and I think you have to produce a lot of things. You have to. I don't think any great artist, architect, designer ever designed one of, like, maybe oftentimes maybe their first work is their best, but it certainly should not be their last. It's like you have to get used to just producing. And that's also the best way I think you become patient with yourself, because the more you produce, the more you're going to produce things you don't like, or maybe that you don't connect with or resonate with, or things that you maybe feel fall short of your expectations of yourself. I think that's super necessary. I think in any creative field, you have to make like 1,000 ugly things before you can understand what making one beautiful thing genuinely feels like. That doesn't mean there's not beautiful things kind of scattered in there. Um, but I think that's kind of how it works. And yeah, so I made a lot of things my thesis year for sure. I think like almost everyone does. And I think it's really important to be engaged in like the study of it, the study of making things. How do you make things? Why do you make things? And I think I was proud of a lot of what I made, but I also believe I believe that I always had to be thinking about it, and this is something I'll kind of dive into, but the idea that, like, just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean that you have to always be thinking about it, or just because, like, it's not like you're not going to be a great architect because you're not living and breathing in studio all the time. I like that's, and we'll talk about this, the idea of the tortured architecture student. I mean, we all go through that, it's very real. But I think I've learned a lot more about architecture when I haven't been around studying architecture. I think, like, we'll get to this, but I think it's not challenging to make architecture, like when you're a child and you draw a box with a triangle on it, that's architecture. I mean, it's paper architecture, but that is in every aspect the same thing that we're doing. So the hard part is not producing architecture, it's connecting it's creating something that we can resonate with and connect with. Um and I always had this idea in academia, that, like, how could I be passionate about architecture if I wasn't letting it consume me? And I think that's like a relatable thing that a lot of people feel. And so this year, this my fifth year is really a time of like intense forward progress, but sometimes maybe in ways that were like against my will. I think you're around peers and you're around people who are pushing themselves in different ways, and often, like, that's some of the best way for growth. I mean, you see, like, I think the reason that um I ended getting to the level that I did as far as like the quality of the material and the designs I produced to myself and my confidence in them came from the fact that I was surrounded by a lot of really talented peers, which is I mean, that's the best thing you can do, you know? I mean, chefs say this all the time. It's like you go to where the best people are. You go to where the people that are drawing things that you enjoy are, and you just study it. Because you're inherently going to do things your own way, right? So I don't think, and Ben Pinnell, my thesis professor, talks about this a lot. You know, it's like you really can't copy something, you know? I mean, yes, you could do the exact same thing, but it's still your version of it, whether it looks exactly the same or not. There is some level of your identity in that thing, you know? And obviously, I don't say go and copy things, but definitely like see what you enjoy. And like oftentimes, I remember learning this from Seth and a lot of my peers that like we look at these great artists that we have that we love, and we see what they're doing that we want to do in our work. You know, it could be a single gesture, it could be a single line, and we study that line and you get familiar with it, and then you start to incorporate it into your work, and then soon after the exposure to this and just the create, you have an arsenal, you have an inventory of all of these kind of, it's a refined sensitivity now to what you enjoy about design. And I think that's really great. I think that's the best thing you can do. Um, and I think a critique of your work, it should always start from feeling, you know. And I'll just read you. Like once you're aware of how you feel, then you can dive into the deeper parts, like the subjective, the objective reasons or why you're feeling that way as a result. Um, but you first have to look at it and what is like your gut reaction to something that you're seeing. You know, it's really easy with paintings or with art specifically, not architecture, because architecture there's a functional component to it. You know, it's like it's hard always to look at architecture specifically, like you know, really tangible built architecture and not have your experience of it be rooted in the functionality. You know, good design goes unnoticed. Great design makes you think, and bad design is inconveniencing. You know, it's like there's a level here that we need to, I think, understand. And it's never going to work. It's never going to work if you care about what other people think first. You know, it's the biggest thing that maybe was is necessary but also hurtful, is like harmful to students, is that whether it's your second, oftentimes I think it's in second, third, maybe even fourth, once fourth and fifth year, but like never create for the professor, you know. And we all do it, you know. We always have a period of time where yes, we are doing it, and yes, we might be really proud of our designs, but part of it is like we know what the professor likes. We're, you know, and that's I think that's necessary because that does start to prepare you for relationships in the real world, you know, specifically in our field. You know, we are a service business in a way. We provide services, and our services, I mean, if we're lucky, our services create emotional connections to space and help us understand the world around us and appreciate things and connect in ways beyond just connecting to, you know, space, to each other and such. um and so now we kind of get to this idea of what's the difference between when you're looking at your work, the value of it and the quality of it. And I think for almost the entirety of my 5 years in the program, I was always associating the value that I produce with the quality, you know. And I think for some people this might work, but I would say it didn't for me. When I assigned value to quality, if I created work that I felt wasn't at like the level of my capabilities, I like wrote it off, or I would assign it as like a diminished exploration, you know. And what I often failed to realize, and I'm still practicing realizing this, you know, is that each design or thing I've produced has an incredible value in that it is necessary for the next thing. I said this earlier. Or it showed me something that I didn't like, you know, which is just as valuable as seeing something you do like, because either way, you're closing the gap, you know, on either end. If you knew everything in the world that you didn't like, then that would also show you everything in the world that you do like, you know. Um, and sometimes like I would create something maybe so profoundly ugly that it reminded me that I can produce things that elicit strong emotional responses, you know? And I think now my relationship with buildings, specifically architecture that's built, is like I used to be such a harsh critic of it. And I really used to judge everything. I would take that gut feeling that I talked about before, and then there'd be no nuance to it. It would just be I'd label it maybe purely off of an aesthetic reason, and then I'm like, bam, bad building, ugly, bad, dumb, you know, etc. I think this is pretty common. I think a lot of people go through this too. And now, I mean, whereas before it's like to me a building had to be beautiful. Now it's like I love the awkward building. I love the fussy, messy, sloppy building, because those are all features that you don't like. describe like frustration, it's like you can't put words to these things, and when you see something that elicits or at least makes you feel like this way, that building is like being very personified. And I think that is an excellent way to design, design through personification. You want to find one salient thing, even if like you design a building that just gets everyone to hate it. I mean, what a strong emotion to provoke from people. It's like if we did that with art, I mean, there's art that does that, and it moves you. People are being moved, and whether or not they're being moved in a positive or negative direction, I think that's their interpretation. I think that's up to them. Um, yeah, so I think kind of jumping to the images on this slide. I didn't learn Rhino until my fifth year. And that's a whole nother thing we can get into. But this room, these are just an elevation or kind of like a section elevation of a room, was my first real exercise in using it. And after a year of this kind of existing, I'm still not sure how I feel about the quality of it necessarily, but the value was immense, immeasurable, because not only did it teach me how to manipulate like form on a complex level in three-dimensional space, which were previously I was using 1800 SketchUp plugins to do, which I mean, that's like I said, a whole nother thing. But I think it also it was the beginning of, I think, a foundational understanding of where I was going to take my thesis. This was just as necessary as the final model that you're seeing all these pretty images of. There's no the value there's no difference, even though the quality may be different. Um, and then I graduated, yay, with some of my buddies, which are in this call now, obviously, and my boy Lonzo was not in this image, but that happened, and it's a big point because you're stepping out of the world of academia and maybe the world of paper architecture, and you're entering, I don't want to say the real world because paper architecture is just as much the real world as built, but you are entering, I don't know, it's the next step. It's the unknown to a level, everything, it's very easy to predict your kind of next day, maybe when you're going to studio and you have a schedule and classes and all that. And this transitions kind of into the next section, what I did right after I graduated. And yeah, I mean, in kind of in short, I walked home. Um, and you can kind of see, so that's roughly where Blacksburg is, I believe. And where it ends up north, that's my home. And that was my journey, I plan on doing this for a couple reasons. I think one of which is it had to be done. I don't know how to put it any other way than that. Sometimes, there's that you feel compelled to do something, it's your calling. You have to do this. um I think another reason was that I think before I knew my life was going to become all about the built environment and structure and composition and all of these predetermined things. I think I needed to subject myself to none of it. I needed to be somewhere where there's no architecture. I needed to completely void myself of everything I had been filling my mind with for the past 5 years intensely. So almost from one extreme to the next. And there's this really great book, and I didn't read it before I left, but I my friend gave it to me, and I read it after I got back. And it's A Philosophy of Walking by Frederick Gross. And I think it's also kind of important, it's a philosophy of walking, not the philosophy of walking. This is he understands that this is his take on it. And a lot of this is about understanding a pace of thought, a pace of creation. Um, when you're thinking, and for design, for me, I mean, for this hike, it took I think I'll probably repeat this at the end just because it adds up, but it's 41 days, 700 miles. There's a lot of time there where you're just walking. I mean, almost all of that is just walking. And when you're walking, it's like, I mean, for the first time in a long time, 99% of my thoughts had nothing to do with what my life had been about the past 5 years. Nothing to do with architecture, nothing to do with design. And I know it's a terrible practice to just read what's on the slide, but man, I mean, this one's been up for a bit, so I probably won't. The next one has the one that comes at the end is a little longer, so I'll probably read that. But I think this is really kind of essential to understand. It's something that I definitely did not under really grasp in my time in academia. I really felt like if I wasn't always cramming as much learning that as I could into a second, that I was wasting time. but really when I was taking my time, I was actually extending it. So yeah, that's I shaved my head with my roommate Ian. Maybe a lecture, giving a lecture in a little bit, a couple weeks. Um, and man, did we look fantastic, you know? We kind of look like a couple in that actually. It's pretty great. But it kind of, like I said, just as the hike had to be done, the shaving of the head had to be done, you know? It was in the way I would say this walk was my pilgrimage, you know. I was returning to my home, which in a way I would say my Mecca, you know, in a sense. It was my North American, you know, journey. Um and for 41 days, everything in my life was in this backpack, you know, this everything. And this was where I slept every night, pretty much, aside from the occasional evening where it was just torrential downpour and you'd maybe find a shelter or something. But it's, you know, there's a lot when you really when you get reduced down to the bare bones of what you are comfortable with and what you need even to like honestly to survive, man, does that open up your mind to all of the space that those things were taking up when you had them, you know? I think I'll kind of touch on that more. But yeah, I mean, what an incredible journey, you know. It's you're just so immersed in the natural world. I mean, it just forces its beauty down your throat everywhere. You know, it's incomprehensible. And you know, on the same way as like your mind goes through transitions, your body does too. You know, I lost 25 pounds in like 41 days. And it was every second of it was just incredible, even though for probably about a third of it I was in like immense pain, which yeah, just a little, you know, an SFW warning on this next one. But it was a lot, you know. It was the hardest thing mentally and physically I've ever done in my life, and I didn't even do the whole thing. You know, I did a 700-mile lash, or it's a long ass section hike. That's what it's called. And I most of the people I would run into in the evenings when you're setting up your tent, they were through hiking the whole thing. You know, all 2,100 miles. So I mean, and we have trail names, you know, everyone has a trail name. And I got toes because my toes were just always messed up. Lost a lot of my toenails. I was in bad pair of shoes for a while. Um, yeah, but I think you just once you get used to really living without comforts and pushing your body, and I think pushing your body to a certain extent kind of goes in hand with pushing your mind. Um, I think you really start to understand, you know, when I'm granted these comforts back, you know, what am I going to do with them? Am I going to make better use of them? You know, and that means, you know, I'll kind of transition out of that moment because I'll go back into it. But just what I saw, I mean, you can't begin to explain. I can't begin to put my even like describe 1% of the depth of the complexity, just the natural complexity of it. You know, it's always so overwhelming. We look at architecture and we literally look at stuff like Mark Foster Gage, and I've done designs in ways, and we all do designs like those super high resolution, all the super intricate detailing. You know, classical design, ornamentation, Baroque, Rococo. You know, and that has nothing. That has nothing on like this turtle. You know, there's so much more complexity in this turtle than anything we will ever create architecturally, you know. A beautiful rhino coming out of a tree. I mean, it's just you can't make this stuff up. It's incomprehensible, you know. And this is all, you know, it's not here. It's like no architecture, no design, no art. I subjected myself to no music as well, which was maybe one of the most challenging pieces. But just this, you know, just the world as it is, its face value. Um, and I think really the ultimate thing that I took away from this was the connection aspect of it. Everyone went by their trail name. So everyone I met, I think in total, I probably met over 100 people, but on the trail that I actually took the time to write down their trail name, I think about 40. Um, and it's incredible because you spend your entire day alone pretty much. No one really hikes together. You kind of hike at your own pace. And you're not with anyone. But you generally end at shelters, you know, where there's water, or generally just around a spring, because you rarely want to dry camp. And it was I mean, everyone is so much more complex, you know, like there is nothing that I could ever create that is even a tenth the level of interest, complexity, and connectivity that a person has, obviously, right? So in a way, it's like our I think our objective on a most simple level as designers is to create a single thing that can connect with someone, even if that someone is yourself, which is it's really hard to do intentionally. I think it's oftentimes it's really easy to unintentionally like create an inspired piece, which I think this happens a lot, like intuitively create this inspired piece. But but to intentionally like craft an architecture that connects, that connects in the way that people connect to each other. I mean, that's the dream. I don't know if a building has ever done that, but I'd like to think that it could. Um and I also, what this really solidified, I think it solidified my belief that, I think people are innately good. I'm innately trust individuals. I think there is more kindness than the opposite in this world. I think these are all important things to consider when we're designing. I really don't think architecture can solve that many issues. I think the only issue, and this was kind of part of what my thesis was about, the only issue I really believe architecture can solve to its entirety is shelter. That's the only thing it's ever really been able to entirely solve as an issue functionally. Um, and I think one of the weaknesses of architecture now is, and one of the problems and why I think we see a lot more uninspired design nowadays, is because we're trying to offload our problems onto architecture. It's like we create these buildings and these projects like this is going to solve this economic issue. This is going to solve a social issue. This is going to solve, you name it. And in doing that, we're taking the responsibility away from ourselves. And we're saying that this inanimate thing that takes up a fixed volume is capable of solving these problems, whereas before we had to solve them. I think the thing that architecture should do is provide us the inspiration, the protection, the shelter to realize that we can solve these issues ourselves. I think that's the greatest thing that we can do. Um, which is really what I was trying to do with my thesis, just create a space that facilitates that. Um, and talking about like the idea of when you're in school, you're just going, 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 going. It's like you feel like you really, at least for me, I didn't, it would take me like if I spent like my Chicago, when I was in Chicago through Chicago Studio, there for like what, 4 or 5 months. And it probably took me 10 months to process it after the fact, because when you're being exposed to such a dense amount of information in such a short period of time, and you're really trying to not only take the information, but then synthesize it and then feed it back out through your designs. You don't get a lot of time to actually understand like I said, the value of what you're learning. I know I'm learning these things, but why are they important? I think the why is a lot more important than necessarily the what always. And I think in relation to that, this quote is really great. Specifically at like the end of like taking your time to understand something, where he says slowness means cleaving perfectly to time. So closely that seconds fall one by one, drop by drop, like the steady dripping of a tap on stone. The stretching of time deep in space. And I mean, they say time flies when you're having fun. It does, and time also flies when you're really busy. And in that way, it's like, isn't the objective kind of the opposite? Don't we want to stretch time out? We don't want our lives to fly by. We want to savor every instant of it. And I think when we create designs that connect with people, that's the savoring of an instant. That's what's so great about art, is because when you're encapsulated by something in that instant, you're there with it. It's a relationship. Um, and so for the walk, that's, I mean, it came to a close, after 700 miles and 41 days. That's my mom, and it was tremendous. It finished. And so now, what came after that? I went from, 5 years of just intense the practice of the study of architecture, and now the application. I got a job. I lost my student Adobe subscription. Tragedy. And I designed my first actual piece of architecture. And so I'm super grateful to have a job in this beautiful area where I grew up, working as the sort of principal designer, coordinator, and project manager of a small design build firm here. And I mean, it really is. I got thrown into it. About 50% of the time, I still don't know what I'm doing, which is fantastic. I think it's a shame when people are fully aware and know everything that they're doing all the time. Um, I think I've learned, I mean, I'll get into the volume at another point, but yeah, so right now, working in practice, something that a lot of us do. And I'm actually currently working on getting a building permit approved for this building that I designed, from start to finish. And that building, this is not it, but this is what the client wanted. And I think now we're going to kind of transition into what is the application of 5 years of intense study, and where does the paper architecture, kind of find some tangible expression in reality. So this is what they sent me. The client sent me what they wanted for the barn. And honestly, I mean, that's a great barn. You can't argue with just you look at that and you're like, oh, that is a barn, baby. And I couldn't agree more. But if I'm gonna do it, I want to. There has to be something from me in it, and so what did I do with that? This was the design that I ended up doing for it. The redesign, or not the redesign, the design of their barn. That was just a precedent that they wanted me to look at. And it's nothing flashy. It's not, it has no grand gesture. It's not trying to say anything or do anything fantastic. Like, what is a barn? Well, architecture is functional. A barn is like one of the most function driven pieces of architecture there is. This one specifically is like 50% for livestock or goats specifically, and 50% like insulated implement storage for, like tractors, cars, like a shop, a tack room. And so, yeah, I mean, I had to understand and work through the permit set for this, and it's like, man, I went from this incredible thesis building with incredible models and renders and all that to like, man, now the application, and how do I make something that has all this and still connects with people, or still can connect with them, with the people that I'm designing for. And I think this is when I was going to kind of get into the volume of what I've learned in such a short period of time. I mean, I've only been at this job for like 2.5 months. And I would say, as far as like the volume of information, I would say it rivals 3 years of academia. But what that doesn't change, like what I learned in academia was equally as important, equally as integral. I think it takes a lot longer to understand the conceptual foundations of design and of architecture and of what makes something beautiful. It takes just as long to understand that as it does to learn a million things about eave detailing or window scheduling or all of these things that you have to know as well. And so I think that's what's kind of great about our field, is that no matter what, you kind of just get thrown into this stuff. Like, and I don't think anyone should ever be worried about knowing this in school. The only time you have to know it is your integrative semester. And after that, like, focus on all the other stuff. Focus on what makes something beautiful to you. Focus on your relationship to your work. Focus on how you judge your work, how you value it. How do you think others may value it? How do they connect with it? That's so much more important to understand than, how things go together. You're going to learn that. You're going to learn that really quickly in the field, really quickly, no matter what. Um, and how we look at a comparison, I mean, the elevations for my thesis project and the elevations that I just made for this permit. And what I really like to do, and what I was trying to do with the barn design, touching on that, is the roof. It's got that cant at the top. It's got a nice little hat. That was the moment. That I chose to focus my energy into something that would be both tangible. I think an expression of a really nice, soft, elegant gesture, and also be something that the client would be interested in. Before I was showing them obviously much more like dramatic versions of this, and they're like, dial it down, and obviously you get to this point over time. But I think the trick is, oftentimes I think, as designers, and if you're confident in your ability to design, you have to know that, like, sometimes you want to show people things that they might not know they want. You show them the most beautiful thing you can, and their mind is going to latch on to that. And they're going to have to give up some things because of VE or cost or stuff like that. But at the same time, once they have it in their head, you've kind of locked them into a composition in a way. And no matter how many things you take away, if when you first create that, you have something that you truly have invested yourself into. And for me, that was this roof. I really am proud of how this roof came out. It's very simple, just canted out. It's such a small thing. I do really like the little tongue sticking out there too of the little covering over that entry door. It's like I don't know. He's a guy with a big forehead, and he's like, eh. That's There's something nice to that, in a way. And obviously, like, general composition, you're looking at the arrangement of the windows, you're looking at the arrangement of the doors, the relationship between them, the proportions, like all of that is things that you like we have learned, that you are learning, that we have learned, it's all there, like Corbusier, like all of it, like Gary, it's all of these things are just in you, and they're going to come out, you just have to expose yourself to them, and don't worry about it when you're designing, it's going to come out. Um and I couldn't have made the barn without the thesis, obviously, because it kind of preed it. But the barn's going to be used, and I hope it's loved, and I hope it's enjoyed by both animals and people, and everything I've learned, like I said, everything I learned from school is still there. And I don't know, I think it just kind of comes to an abrupt end now, but I think that's really all I had to say. And yeah, I mean, it's really just about understanding your work, understanding how you value your work, um, doing as many things as you can, but taking your time with them. If I was sprinting through that walk home, I think it would have been lost on me for sure. Um, but yeah, thank you guys for your time. Thank everyone for being here. I hope we something you connected with something. And yeah, I think this is maybe handing it back over to Seth, but it's been great to kind of talk to you guys about where I'm at and what I've done and what I think. So thank you guys.
Yeah. Um, Thanks. That was a really powerful presentation. It's quite amazing to see everything kind of laid out, um, you know, on the table for us to look at. And you know, I haven't talked with you much since the hike, and I can really see how the hike has been this, it's been this like milestone, I think, for you. And it's exciting to see like how you're thinking about things differently, or kind of, or it's all very similar, but it's also like it's been developed, into, you're finding what you want to say, and you're finding what makes you happy, and what gives you this, the sense of like peace and excitement and joy. And I think a lot of us are still looking for that in our lives. And and I think for me, like, this was really a nice, um, it was a nice presentation, obviously, because we got to see your work and your journey, but also because I think it does a really good job of showing the academia versus practice. And I'm experiencing that in my life right now. And I think for anyone who's watching this that's a student, you don't have to go work, but you probably will, because it's hard to not go work. We all have these dreams of going to do whatever, and I think it will happen for people that want it to happen at some point, in maybe a different way than you can imagine. But I think it's very few people that just kind of jump right into their own thing, if that's even what you want. But this is just really nice, because seeing how you're getting the same kind of joy, if not more joy, over the real building, as opposed to something that you might consider to be technically more powerful. But there's honestly, to me, like in architecture, the power comes from it being a thing that you're standing next to. Like, you can walk up and walk in
Yeah,
it, and
it's no
walk.
matter how no matter how inspired the design is, it's not until it's built and it can be experienced in perception, like physical space, by not just people who are interested in looking at two-dimensional drawings, that I think that's where it can connect. That is ultimately the only place where it can connect, or have the opportunity to connect with everyone. When it's just in paper, when it's just two-dimensional, it's never going to be able to connect with everyone. And I think that's the biggest difference. And I think that's the thing that we need to overcome, in that we have to stop looking at them as differently. We have to look at them as equally as necessary, and a relationship between them, but not necessarily, they're different.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think everything you said was really interesting and powerful, and like it was just amazing to hear it. So I'll open up the floor with any questions. I'll actually start with one because I have one, and then I'll let anyone else ask. So one thing I'm interested in is what do you think is going to be, you know, you maybe have already mentioned it, but like what would you say is your biggest takeaway from the hike into what's next for you in practice and architecture? I mean, you have an opportunity to, you know, to kind of lead some interesting projects, and the hike seems like a huge deal. And I'm interested, like I haven't heard a lot about the hike and like what that how that changed you, I guess, or didn't change you. Either way is interesting to me. But what would you say is like, you know, what would you say is like, you know, something like the biggest takeaway, I guess, from the hike into what you're doing now?
Oh man. Um, hmm. I think if I could put it into words really well, I think it may, I don't know, it's really hard to describe feeling, like before I mentioned, like, can you describe like frustration? You can't, it's really hard to put words to these like super visceral feelings that we experience. You can really only understand it as a feeling. But I think, in assurance, I came out of it kind of assured that no matter what I do, I really could create a terrible building. Genuinely, in every facet, it could fail as a piece of architecture. It could collapse. And, there's still a beautiful forest. There's still nothing. My impact, luckily, I don't think any architect, I mean, maybe some of us think this, but we really like our impact is limited to who connects with our work. And if someone doesn't connect with your work, that's it. It ends there. um but we are irreparably drawn and innately pulled at all times to connect to the natural world, to connect to the actual world, not even the natural world. The real world is not, I would say the real world in truest sense is not necessarily like living in our, it's not homes on planet Earth. It's just, it is what it is. It is as it is. The worst architect was the first architect, because who was he to think that he could create anything better than what was already here? I mean, but now we do, and now we try. So we're trying, we're gonna do our best. And I would love to just only love the rest of my projects and understand that through maybe the patience I gained on the hike, maybe the understanding that the pressure's off of us. We don't have the pressure to create the most beautiful thing. It's out there. It all is there. It's all the most beautiful thing. So we shouldn't be as worried. And I think I'm just not as worried now. I think that's what it is. I'm just not as worried. And I think when you're not as worried, you have more real estate in your mind to explore the things you're interested in, to invest your passions and your creativity into your work. And I think that's what I'm going to ideally try and continue to do. Even though sometimes we may get a bathroom renovation that the client wants the most absurd, horrific looking things, and I'm going to, sometimes you just give it to them because it'll make them happy. And that's a great thing to do, to make someone happy. I mean, who cares if you're making a piece of art if a child loves what you've done? That's the best thing you can do. So yeah, that was a really long answer to what's one takeaway, but I'm not worried. I guess that's my takeaway. I think that's it.
Sweet. Well, if anyone else wants to ask any questions, feel free.
And all
Hey,
good.
Taco.
Oh, what's up, Kazuki and Stanson?
Yeah, Stanton's here as well. Want to say something? Um, I just wanted to ask, now that you've like been in the profession for a couple months, are there things that you miss about, school, that, I don't know, you're trying to
Yeah.
fulfill?
Yeah. I mean, I think like a lot of us, I miss just getting deep into this stuff. I mean, there's not a lot of people, because it's our 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever now. It's like outside of that, sometimes it's a lot to like keep talking about it. But as before in school, it was our open your eyes in the morning to go to bed at night, and it was just so always on. Or we were always diving so deep into the most nuanced, at the time, the most important things, maybe now slightly inconsequential, but like equally as important. Yeah, I miss getting deep into these talks about things like triple O, about these design concepts and theories and art and critique, and just the nuances of a bunch of people around you, around the same age, around the same mental development, trying to process how much information we're getting. I just loved like late nights with you guys, many of the guys in this call, just talking about what we love about things, what we hate about things. Now it's hard to find the time to do that because everyone in the world who's not in our field or doesn't expose themselves to the things that we have, and maybe they have sensitivities but in different things. It's hard to get that to go onto that level with them, so I think I'm missing that for sure. I definitely miss just like the passion filled rants and the conflicts that may arise from it, and the discussions and the energy. There was an energy to it, and I think that's all stuff that we can maintain. I think Seth is he's that's to me it's kind of what he feels like. I feel like what we're trying to accomplish with what he's trying to accomplish with the commune. I think that'll be, for me at least, the thing that I get out of it the most. I think having a space where you can dive into the things that really used to only inhabit academia. I think exposing that to the professional world is super important. I think it's only going to stand to benefit us here, the students, people who are actively students, and even, I mean, adults. I would really love to think that someone could watch that presentation on YouTube, and like a fully fledged 50-year-old principal of a firm, and gain something. Even if they just understand something about me, I think that's just as valuable as them gaining actual knowledge on design. And what, yet again, another really long way to answer your question, but I miss the depth and the intensity in which we could go into talking about this stuff, because what's better than like a shared passion, just sharing your passion with people.
Hell yeah, man. It's good to hear you talk again.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, I miss you. I miss you. I miss you. Missing the guys. Yeah, it's so hard to do. We gotta make a lot of money so we can come visit each other in person. That's the goal. That's the goal here. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I think unless we
Can
got
you hear
any
me?
hot questions. Yeah. Yeah.
This is Alonso.
Love you.
Love you too. I guess my question is, you talked about the relationship between um your thesis project and the love that you have for your current project. Um, I guess what how are you starting to work through what that means to be able to have yourself as a piece of something that is simple in a project like that? That's something that
Mhm.
I'm also still trying to come to terms with as well as a designer and
Yeah. Yeah.
out of school.
Yeah. I think and if we're looking at it even on the barn, like even on a maybe can I go back? Let me see if I can. Oh yeah. Even on the barn, the roof is even like, let's say if I was working at like a larger firm, right, and we were doing a barn for some reason, I mean, it would be very unlikely that I would even get to make a gesture at the scale of a roof, over something like this. Let's say I just got the overhang on the above that door, right? I think kind of going back to value versus quality, I think if I was only assigned to design the covering over that door, um, I'm gonna I don't it's hard to put in word. I think I would really like, you have to approach it all the same, you have to approach, if you're just given like a corner detail, someone's like, design this cabinet edge, you have to approach that as if you're designing like the building. You have to look at it as if the conceptual gesture that you're making at that scale is just as important, something that you can be just as proud of at the scale of the pride you feel for that has to match if they said design this whole building. And when you're able to be equally proud of something at the smallest scale, then you're okay not having necessarily having control over the rest of it. Because whether you're contributing to a greater whole in a project with a bunch of people working on it, or you have full control over it, it's still the coagulation of a million things, right? And it's like even if you have every say in what happens in design, you're not designing like the the board and batten panels on the outside, right? Like you're gonna have to give some things up, right? We don't fabricate or with the intention of designing every single nail and screw that goes into this, you know. But maybe the guy who designed that nail or screw, whatever, no matter, maybe his passion is pure functionality, right? And he found the ultimate joy in creating like this optimal screw or something, right? I mean, that's the same thing. That's the same thing. The scale of pride that you can feel for something that you do, no matter how big or small, I think is super important. And like just you just have to be proud of one thing, right? Like one little bit of it. And that's enough for you to say, you know what, like I've contributed. I have added to the quality of this. I am proud of what I did, even if the final product is maybe not a representation of that. I don't know if that answers it, but I think it's just like and being patient with it, you know, because it's not always going to be like that. There's definitely I know there's going to be times where all of us have to just kind of make a bunch of sacrifices for the design, right? There definitely is gonna be cases for that. But you just have to move through it, right? You just have to keep making it, keep being a part of things. Eventually you're gonna get something that you're like, this is it. Like I love this thing. I love this window corner I did, you know? I think you just have to keep doing it and being patient with yourself. And yeah, know that it's if you're happy with it, it's great. And that's enough. Yeah, I don't know if that answers it, Lance, but
Yeah, thank you.
mhm.
Any more questions?
All good.
All
I
right.
feel like we got some really good ones there, and it was
Yeah.
really nice hearing from everyone who asked. I miss you guys. I love you all. What a joy! What a joy we have to be able to do this kind of stuff, right? So it's great.
Um, continue getting your friends to join. We want more people. We want to to build this group and see what can come from a large army of people. We don't care about your specific take on architecture, as like oh, you can't join because you don't follow in line. Like we want to hear what you have to say, and you um you know that's what I think will make something like this group really exciting, is having people that will debate each other, having people that will go against each other. Um, but ultimately, like we all care about something similar. And I think, we have yet to really see that. But I think with this lecture series starting, it's going to be a really, hopefully a really good, launch um, to the original hopes of the commune. And we're really excited to continue to have more people lecture, continue to grow in numbers. I'm hoping by like the third lecture we'll have like 100 people join. And it's not about numbers, but I really do think there could be something exciting. When we all come together, and there's so many different types of people across different types of disciplines, different, they've been taught different ways. And that's what really excites me, is just like everyone can join. We don't care. You don't even have to be architecture, you don't have to be art, you don't have to be anything. Like that's, I think, where something like this can thrive, because all of you have something interesting to bring to the table, and that's what we're trying to do here. And I think Tucker did a great job of kicking us off, sharing his point of view on things. If you disagree, if you agree, like that's good. Try to think about why you agree or disagree, and come to the table. Maybe send an email and say you want to give a lecture. We'd love to add you to the list. Love to hear what you have to say as well. Like, don't feel like you have to be, oh, I'm not, I'm not, like I haven't been through school enough or long enough. Like I don't know how to speak well enough. Like I can't even, like, I struggle with talking to people, sometimes. And I think honestly, that's where you might learn the most about a person, is, those like raw conversations. So, anyway, I think that's it for this lecture. I think we're having another one next weekend, so you guys should all hop on that. This will be posted pretty soon on social media and everything. So hopefully you guys can help push this out and get people from your schools and stuff to join. So thanks again, Tucker.
Thank you guys. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, just man, if you could take away anything, just find something you love, It doesn't have to be architecture, it doesn't have to be design. Just find one thing and find a way to get yourself doing it. That's how simple it is. It's really that simple. It's that simple.
Yep. All right.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.